Hey YouTube, welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Sequel Q&A. My name's Doug. This week's special video interview, I say special because you remember your first in life. The first time that I talked to, a director was like the coolest thing, being able to find out really what goes in day out, special effects, what really goes into, all that 4-second killing a movie that you see. And there's just like days upon days of going into it. And today was a first. I just got done interviewing Daniela Saioni, and she's a script supervisor, and she has worked with so many great actors, directors, and she has a course that she teaches. And when she sent it over to me just to do some research, it's titled The Director Whisperer. And I'm like, it gives me an idea of what the job entails, but man, so much more goes into being a script supervisor. The continuity of the scenes and the eye levels and things that she has to look for. There's she would need 8 heads, but she has one and she does a great job at it. So we talked about her inspiration, how Jim Morrison somehow inspired her to know that film school was a thing, and growing up in a small town in Canada, she was able to, from that, do some research and start pursuing that. And we talked about, obviously, a lot of the movies and the TV shows that she worked on over the years. Jason X, which is going to be our Friday the 13th movie. She worked on that. She also worked on Boondock Saints, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the USA Network hit shows Covert Affairs, and also Suits, Xander Cage. And we talked about that. She was so happy that How Did This Get Made covers 2 of her movies, Triple X, The Return of Xander Cage, and then also it was Jason X. So she was pretty proud of that. But I love chatting with her. I'm going to put the link to her YouTube channel so you can check it out. She actually told me she was in Vancouver not too long ago, and 2 people came up and said, Daniela, I love your videos. And she's like, what? Because she's putting content out there and she loves it. She loves having the ability to teach and help out students of hers for her Director Whisperer class and her comedy writing all around the world, and she's helped so many out. Some really cool stories within the interview. We talked about acting school, Lee Strasberg, Meatloaf, and so much more. Do me a favor, before I start the interview, please hit subscribe. Why not? Be a pal. And without further ado, here is script supervisor, stand-up comedian, Daniela does it all, Daniela Saioni. Hit the button. You're from Toronto? That's where you grew up too?
Yep.
Toronto's a beautiful city. Like I told you in that email, we got married. We did our own, because my wife's sister had a huge, big wedding, and we got married 2 weeks later. We had already had a plan, but we're let's just do us. So we did the Niagara Falls on the Canada side, then went to Toronto for a night. And then 4 months later, we went to Iceland on a honeymoon.
Iceland.
But no, Toronto was so much fun. We only spent a night there. So we went to that mansion that has a ton of movies filmed there, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Not Drake's house. I know what you mean, Casaloma.
Yeah, and we went to a bunch of cool bars, on Queen and King Street. Mm-hmm. It was just a cool city, and the Blue Jays were in the playoffs that year, 2015. So it was really cool vibe. Everybody was really welcoming. It was awesome. Canadians, all nice. So how does your journey begin? Growing up in Toronto, what is it growing up? Was it a show you watched or maybe a play you went to that got you into thinking about this crazy world of Hollywood?
Okay, this is going to be the weirdest answer you could probably expect from me. But
I like it.
In grade 8, I was such a huge Jim Morrison fan. I was this massive Doors fan. And I read that he went to film school at Berkeley. No, at UCLA. I read he went to film school, and I went, you could go to film school? And so in high school, I did everything, and I wanted to do everything. And I think film was the only thing that allows you to act right. It just allows you to do so many things at once.
Wow. So right from grade 8, you knew that was going to be something. Did you have an idea what facet that you wanted to go towards?
No. I've come out so many times in my career I came out as an actress when I was 33. I came out as a writer when I was a little bit older than that, a stand-up after that. So I'm one of these multi-potentialites. We don't stop.
That's good. You keep it fresh. Like, I love talking to people that have done so much because maybe it keeps you more in tune, like, into your career, because you have all these different ventures that you can sort of go off into. Wow. So what was that first step? So grade 8, you knew Jim Morrison inspired you. So what was that first step from there? Did you do anything in high school? Like, did you start doing any theater or anything?
Yes, I was in community theater, and I grew up in a hood here called Jane and Finch, which is so it's like the poorest part of Canada, pretty much. So it's not like, I had any connections or anything like that. I think I just gravitated to every art form to survive. So I was in band. I was in community theater. I was the photographer for the year, but I just kept going. Like, I didn't stop. I was like a workaholic for the arts, and then I just applied for film school in my graduating year, and it was harder to get in at the time than law school. We had at the time, like, I don't know, 6 programs across Canada for filmmaking, because this was 1987. Remember, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. The States were the same way. There was really, even in the 80s, there was only like New York, Chicago, Austin, LA, maybe like Seattle or something. But no, there wasn't much.
Well, now there's like 6 film schools in every town, right? But they literally told me, "Oh, don't even go to film school. Like, you'll never get in." But I had this really high, I'm like, my nickname in high school was Brainiac. So I had this really high average. I'm like, I'll go to film school if I want to go to film school. And yeah, I got in, and I never learned anything at all about script supervision, the profession that I became internationally known for eventually.
Yeah.
Didn't even know it existed until afterwards. I could tell you that story too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I think. It's so cool. I think so many people get into it for a certain, hey, I want to do blank. And then they just find this different art form, like Vernon Wells, who's been like a legendary bad guy in so many movies. Huh? When I was talking to him, he's like, I just wanted to be a background guy. And he's like, he was in some Australian commercial, I think, and he was in the background drinking beer. And the director was like, hey, you. Come up. And he was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. And then even after he was in a few things, he still didn't want to be in front of the camera. He just wanted to be behind. But he just like, I guess because he's like, all right, people like me doing this, so I'll keep doing it.
Cool. I'm trying to think if I ever worked with him. I guess I'm so bad at that. Every time I go to work on something, I usually don't know names. So I'll ask my friends, is this anybody?
So let's get into that. How did script supervision, how did that become a thing for you?
Okay, so I couldn't land on what I wanted to do in film. And in my graduating year of film school, I had won this national apprenticeship award where you could pick. I picked editing because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I knew I really loved editing. And then I got to the cutting room. I had this apprenticeship at the National Film Board, which is documentary. It's a big documentary organization up here. But it wasn't like in film school when we used to edit on Steenbecks, and like, I'm old, right? We used to edit with like scissors sometimes. We used to edit in groups. Like everyone would be cutting at the same time. Once I got to work as an assistant editor in this apprenticeship program, I was by myself, or maybe there was one person, in the room with me, and it was making me crazy. I was like, this is not for me. I'm more extroverted than this. So I went to my mentor and I said, listen, I love editing, but I can't take being by myself all day. I said, I think I want to be on set. And she said, why don't you become a script supervisor? And I said, what's that? And she said, well, there's a gig tomorrow. It was like a Queen's University master's thesis film. They're like, they'll put you up. They put the whole crew up like in this one house, and they'll pay you. They're paying like $100 a day. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Editing, you'll be fine. So I bought a book. Pat P. Miller had a book, Script Supervision and Continuity. I read it overnight. And it was like love at first sight. I was able to help the director with everything, coverage and eye lines, and even the actual continuity. Like, listen, I'm so disorganized in life. I couldn't believe that I could do everything because it's a massive job, right? But it was love at first sight. And then I really just kept working.
No, it is such a massive job. So what obviously different sets, different directors, maybe they want different things. What is the average that you have to focus on during a day of shooting?
That's a really great question. So yes, every director asks something different of you, and there's still a baseline technical proficiency that you have to hit. I don't have a photographic memory. I have can we swear? I have bad eyesight and a horrible memory. So I have to be really aware of what I'm looking for. And I'm always looking at the cutting points. So you can't remember most of everything, but you have to know what's important. So the advantage I had going in is I know exactly what I'm watching for. I'm watching for the cutting points. And even when the director doesn't know where they're going to cut, I have some idea where they're going to cut, right? So yeah, it means your brain is on all day. So, you're talking 12, 16-hour days on some movies. I've clocked a few 23-hour days for sure. And your brain is always on. It's intense. But yeah, you just learn to focus on what's important and then to do what the director needs from you, because every director needs something different from you. I can get into specific examples. It's wildly different. Yeah.
So when it comes to the script of it, are you you have the script in front of you while they're speaking and making sure that they're saying the right lines?
Yeah, so it's a whole dance with your eyes and hands, and it's because you're looking at the monitors, because now we shoot with multiple cameras. So however many cameras, if it's an action movie, you're at least looking at 4 cameras, maybe more. You've got your script, you've got your computer because you're taking stills as well of the frames that are popping up. If you do that, so sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and then I'm making notations by hand about when they turned and when they stood and what lines they changed to what. So yeah, you're doing 5 things at once always.
Wow. No, because I never knew you guess by titles sometimes. So it's so cool when I get to talk to people that I've never talked to get the ins and outs. There's this actor that I'm helping write a book, this guy Larry Hankin. He's been a ton of things, but he told me on Breaking Bad, because he's dyslexic, so he always over the years have tried to get not a lot of lines together. So Vince Gilligan liked his audition. So because of that, he gave him a monologue in his scene, and he was dreading it. So he's I do the monologue. I try the best I can. I'm done. I'm whoa, I did it. And then he goes, and then this script lady comes over and it was just handing me my thing. And he's there were so many red circles on there of lines I missed.
It's a whole art too about working with actors, right? Because everyone's got different, and I have worked with actors with severe learning disabilities for lines. I won't tell you who on Suits, but one of the major actors on Suits, season 1, until he got a personal assistant to run lines with him, I was literally parked by the camera and I would just call out one line at a time. It was wow. And every actor needs something different from you too. So, for some actors, we have to put Post-it notes and hide the lines on set, and you have to know what's important and what's not important to correct. And, and usually the writer's right there to say, can you please get them to say it like this? Yeah.
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 Yeah. You think people in Hollywood are on this pedestal, but they could have horrible childhood. I couldn't believe when I listened to an interview with Joey Pantaleone. He grew up in Jersey, and he didn't know how to read. He only learned how to read through doing theater classes in high school.
Oh,
which
wow.
is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. But obviously, if there's a talent that you have that people need, they'll work with it. They'll work with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So right in the beginning, so when you're doing this, you love it after reading that book and you catch on. As you look at the early credits that you have, they are like you said, documentary ones. There's one like Leonardo, Mercury.
Yeah.
So everybody in history, Isaac Newton, everyone you cover.
Oh, those were actually children's specials for HBO. So those were scripted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And we shot them in Italy and Ireland. Those were sort of my first overseas. I've worked in 10 countries now, but that was
crazy.
It's wonderful. The whole world is a film family, right?
So how did it all start? So you did that. Yeah. And then you stayed in that house. You were making $100. So from there, what was the turning point that you got to be going overseas within a couple of years?
So back then we didn't have the internets. So the only way to get work was literally to hustle. So to send faxes and to so I used to read the trades, and I always tell, I train script supervisors now all over the world, but I always tell them to do the equivalent modern day of what I did. I would read the trades, see what was in development, and if I connected with something about it. So with those ones, for example, I speak Italian, and I'm an Italian citizen, so it wouldn't have been hard to get my work permit. In fact, it wasn't hard because it was a Canadian co-production. But I wrote to them to say, I speak Italian, I can converse with your crew. I only had a few credits by then, but I faxed the producer this letter, and he said I was hired before he met me because I wrote this professional fax cover letter. It was very funny. But yeah, we really clicked. He called me into his office for an interview, and he's like, "Oh yeah, how are we not going to bring Daniela?" So I got to work on, his shows were Ireland and Italy. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Wow. And then right from there, you're just getting all those credits and all that experience, right out of the gate.
Not right out of the gate, because I graduated film school during a recession. It's something that modern day kids graduating film school, even though it is a recession, film never stops. It's a machine now. There's no, we used to have these, save your money for the downtime. No downtime now. It's basically you have to learn how to say no to stuff now, right?
Yeah.
But so the first 3 years I wasn't working a lot, and then I got Tech War, which is the world's worst show ever, but it was my first union show. And I'm going to write a tell-all book about Shatner because he was so mean to me. But
oh no, I could see that. There's so many people that you're I could see that when people say about certain actors or actresses. I'm I get that, or directors. It's that makes sense.
I usually don't say that about anybody, but it was so extreme. And I was 23 at the time. It was crazy. It was awful. I didn't know, it was my indoctrination into set life, right?
Right off the bat, baptism by fire, just right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so you're doing all the HBO ones. And then what was the first, so obviously you did the Tech War, which was a TV series, like you just said. But after that, what was the first the first Hollywood movie or big budget that you worked on?
Well, the first thing that really made my career wasn't big budget at all. It was My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So we shot that. We shot that for $5 million. That's nothing with a huge cast like that. So what had happened was I had just gotten into IATSE, which is our big union for film. I was in a different union before that. We have two other unions in Canada. And I was okay, now I'm IATSE. And I was getting these huge offers because we're always short of people in the script department. And they offered me this huge Stallone movie called Avenging Angelo. Probably never heard of it, right?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
But I had read this script and I was mortified. I'm Italian and I know he's Italian, but the script really offended me as an Italian human being. And I kind of made the mistake of phoning the producer saying, I can't even come in for an interview. I'm so offended by your script. I never did that again because that producer never called me in. But then that same day I had the interview for Greek Wedding and I read that script and I went, this is going to be huge. I read it going, everyone's, and I loved it, even though it was it was going to pay me a third of what the Stallone movie was going to pay. But I was I'm so in. And I was competing with a Greek script supervisor too. I remember that. I remember thinking, oh, she's going to get it. She's Greek. I begged for the job and they were like, oh, you're so into this movie. I was like, yes, this is, because I am a comedy script supervisor ultimately. And I learned that around that time. And so after that, every sort of comedy, I'd get random calls. I got a random call one day from a director in Montreal. She's like, I looked on IMDb. I saw you did Greek Wedding. Can you get on a train and do my movie in Montreal? So I did. Yeah.
Wow. Really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess that's what people see. They're like, hey, I want this kind of vibe. And maybe just having all those people that were involved.
And comedy is actually harder than drama to shoot. I worked on a movie called A Simple Favor with Paul Feig, and Paul Feig is one of my favorite directors, right? So I hadn't met him at this point, and I was going in for the interview. I had just done an 18-hour day, and my interview with him was at 8 in the morning, and I was like, okay, I'm going in. It was 2 hours after I wrapped this 18-hour day. I was like, Paul, I just think you're the best director and I want to work with you on this. And it was a psychological thriller, of course. And he said, okay, but I just need to warn you that I make script supervisors cry, which I found hard to believe. I was like, yeah, right. Because he's the nicest man on the planet. And he said, no, really, because I'm going to shoot this like a comedy. And I went, and I slammed the table and I went, bring it. Because like, I will go to the wall for comedy. And we just hit it. He's like my favorite director I've ever worked with. We just had so much fun on that movie. And he did direct it like a comedy. It was so much improv and so many, just trying so many things. It was great.
That's awesome. When did, were you always into comedy like growing up? Okay, so I had a very terrible marriage for about 2 years, and it was so extreme. I've seen some shit like throughout my life, because of where I grew up, because of the film industry in the 90s. Anyone who's been through the film industry pre-2000 has seen some shit because there was no regulation of anything, right? There was a lot of sexual harassment. There was a lot of bullying. There's a lot of everything. So then I had gone through this super traumatic marriage to a former child actor, and it was extreme. And I think I found comedy right after that. Like Greek Wedding was literally before I married, like literally right the day before my wedding, we wrapped Greek Wedding. but like when I came out of those 2 years of the marriage, just everything became about comedy, like everything. So I think it's survival and just joy and coping, Did right away you start doing stand-up? Because that was on...
No, I started doing stand-up in 2008 because I was,
nice.
First I had to come out as an actress. I had to there's so many, I love when people find themselves later in life because we can keep finding ourselves all the way till we die,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And I just, at the age of 33 after my divorce, I started acting. And then I realized I was getting really character-y roles. And I didn't discover stand-up till I went to Second City. And then I was like, it was just like with script supervision. My first stand-up set, I'm like, this is for me. Yeah. So yeah, I did it for 8 years. Now I'm a comedy screenwriter, but I keep doing, I keep reinventing, but that's
cool.
Survival.
That's what life is. Like you're right. Like metamorphosis, like every so often and that's something, those 8 years are something you're going to have forever. And then there might be something in 5 years that pops up and then it just helps you evolve.
Well, it's like I was talking to Paul Feig about this. I didn't know he was a stand-up before he wrote Freaks and Geeks and before he became a director. And he said that those years, and he was a touring stand-up, he said those years were seminal. And I think that's how he met Judd Apatow. And so he's like, people don't realize the impact, like your time in stand-up, however finite it is, has on your future creativity. And it's so true.
Yeah, there's a ton of people that you don't think of as stand-up, like Michael Keaton. Yeah, stand up. There's like so many people, and you're like, really? And you cut your teeth because it's not easy.
Oh my God, I do have. You just made me remember the Boondock Saints. So, do you know that movie?
Yes.
Okay, so I script supervised the Boondock Saints, and that was nonstop comedians on set. So there was, of course, Billy Connolly, just who was always on and just always like doing stand up between takes, but everyone would visit set. So Harlan Williams would visit set. And of course, Bob Marley, the comic was in the movie. So all their friends would come to set every day. So I think that had an impact on me. I was super shy. Like if you've ever seen the documentary Overnight, I'm in it for some flash frames. And I'm quite huge. I was like a big, it was like when I was going through my terrible marriage, but I look at how shy I was. I was like not speaking in any of the clips, surrounded by these giant personalities, and they were amazing to me. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's so cool that they all came out. And now it's all, most of this obviously shot in 10 different countries, but a lot of the movies, they're in Toronto based, right?
Yeah. And I had, how lucky was I? I had no clue that Toronto would become this center because it was kind of in the 80s because we were like a tax credit haven. But then later on, it's one of the biggest filmmaking centers in the world. And who knew that was going to happen? I had no clue.
It's Vancouver, Toronto, and then Hollywood. This guy I just talked to, Gary Chalk, he told me that. He's like, that's what it is. He's like, it's Vancouver, and then we call that Hollywood South. Like the regular Hollywood.
Yeah. And Atlanta. Atlanta's huge. It's the busiest center.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So it's good that they have those film hubs like that because you get so many people that are local that have that opportunity. Like Hallmark is all over Vancouver.
Yeah.
What are some of the things locally that is Toronto based?
In Toronto. Well, Netflix built a studio here.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working I think I've worked for every major studio now, but you know, Warner Brothers is always doing something big here. I do stuff with New Line, like we did Shazam up here. So there's always at least one huge movie shooting here, and I'll usually do it. There's a few of us that sort of rotate around them, but I'm always like just looking for the comedies. Yeah, no, everybody shoots here. Lionsgate. Yeah. And a lot of TV too.
The comedies. That's what you're looking for. But then along the way, like you did like Gossip.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Okay. So
many cool movies.
I can't remember if we shot Gossip before Boondock Saints or the other. They were around the same time.
It was after Gossip. Oh, well, it could have been the same time. 99 Boondocks came out. 2000 was Gossip.
Okay, because Norman Reedus was in both, and I can't remember where I met him first, but he was so great. And James Marsden, like what a great cast.
Yes.
Lena Headey, Kate Hudson, like these were Joshua Jackson. These were a lot of their earliest movies, and we had so much fun on Gossip, like so much. That was a big break for me, actually, because that was at the point where now I was getting called for, you know, $30 million studio features. Yeah. Yeah, which sounded like amazing. A lot to me back then. Yeah,
but still, oh no, I know. And then Shazam probably was what?
Well, that was only like 100. I did work on. Okay. A Suicide Squad was much higher, but I was only like action unit on that. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you worked on Suicide Squad in Atlanta, or did they shoot in Toronto?
The first one was shot in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
The second one, I think, might have been Atlanta or somewhere else.
Yeah, it was. I talked to a guy that did like the fight coordinator on it, and he was down in Atlanta when I talked to him. But
was it Bobby Brown? No, it wasn't. Bobby
it was Richard Norton.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's an old martial arts guy that's in like a million of those B martial arts movies. But the cool thing was, him and Chuck Norris were like best buddies, and the reason he came over to the country was in Australia. He was a bodyguard. If anybody came over, bands, he would be the guy. Rolling Stones. But it was Linda Ronstadt that convinced him to come to the United States. She goes, come on, Richard, just come for my summer tour. Then you can go back. You know, you don't have to stay here forever. And then he goes, and I stayed there forever. I never went back.
I love stunt coordinators. I love doing comedies, but I will do the occasional blockbuster action movie because I just love working with stunt guys, and I would love working with VFX guys and girls, like women and men. But like, I just love their passion. They're so into it.
There's just so much that has to go right.
Yeah.
It's so like, it's like math. It's like engineering, like into all this.
That's right.
Great.
There's vertical layers and horizontal layers. Like it's a good mental challenge for me.
So then, so Jason X is right around this time, which that movie was, I think the coolest thing about that movie was that was before all of this, right? Mm-hmm. You shot that before, even probably Boondock Saints.
It was after.
Close around it. Oh, it was after? Okay.
But what was interesting, the reason I took Jason, because you'll never see any horror movies I'm not like a horror movie person, but it was so interesting. It was the first, people don't remember this, it was the first movie completely digitally done in post. So there was a lot of visual effects stuff I had to learn. And they used, if you watch the making of Jason X, by any means necessary, hilarious title of the making of, because it's like ultimately a Friday the 13th movie in space. But it talks about how they were the first movie ever. It was a $10 million budget, which was really low and yet really high for like that kind of franchise. And the director, who's no longer with us, was a total sweetheart. And his mentor was Cronenberg. So Cronenberg's got an acting debut in it. So there were a million reasons to do that movie, but nothing to do with the actual movie.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The only behind the scenes that I watched, well, I want to watch that documentary, but I watched the one that was like probably like 10, 15 minutes that's part of the Crystal Lake. Like full 12 movies. But yeah, like Todd Farmer wrote it, but it's pretty cool. Cronenberg's like, I'll be in the movie, but I have to get killed.
Yes,
which is so awesome.
And he wanted a really good kill too. He had a good kill. Yeah.
It was awesome. No, it was so cool. And I love the fact the reason they made that movie was the fact that everything was still, they couldn't figure out, even though New Line owned Freddy and Jason now at this point for 5-6 years already, they couldn't figure out how to put the movie together or get it greenlit. So they're like, you know what? Let's just do a Jason movie. but we can't mess with it. The continuing it. So let's just do it 400 years in the future.
Todd pitched the idea of space. Oh my God. Like, and also, you know, it actually ends up being doable on a low budget because everything's green screen. So we shot it all in one place. We shot it in the same studio where we shot Suits. It's an Air Force base in Toronto.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you were on set so in that type of movie, you're looking at the way people like, because I know Kane in the behind the scenes, he hated the fact that he got shot because they had to remember how many bullet holes. So that was you remembering
in his case, it was wardrobe and special effects because they had to rig the bullet, the blood, and that wasn't necessarily me. I would just double check that, but they would have to rig his suit, and we'd shoot out of order, so they'd have to go, okay, how many bullet holes at this point in the movie?
Yeah,
Kane was hilarious. You know that? Okay, side note, I don't know if you know this about Kane, but he's a member of Mensa. So it's like that, you know, extreme intelligence organization. And he kept asking me to join Mensa. And I was like, well, how do I even know if I qualify? He gave us all Mensa tests. He goes, I bet you're going to score the highest. I didn't. The sound guy scored the highest, but I was Mensa level. He was right. I didn't join though. But he's so big on that stuff. It was very funny.
Well, that tells how intelligent he is because all of the stunts that he's like created over the years that he's not even like doing himself, like how great. Then his story is great because he got burned. If I got burned doing something, even though it was my job, I don't think I could do it again.
Yeah,
and he's just like, 3 years later, he's doing a full burn in part 7. Just crazy.
Oh my God.
Insane.
He was
and
fun.
Then, so like a big thing. So obviously USA shot a lot up there because Covert Affairs was up there.
Yeah.
Did that help you get Suits too?
Well, it was the same. So USA actually did Tech War, little known fact.
Really?
That was their first show up in Toronto, I believe. It was 1993, 94.
That only lasts 1 year because I used to watch USA Network all the time. I remember all those shows like Pac Blue and like La Femme Nikita that would be on after wrestling.
Oh yeah, they shot that here too.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. Well, you might have been really young. So Tech War, they did 4 Tech War movies, and I didn't work on those. And then they did the series. So they were here for a few years during that terrible show. They're revamping Tech War as an animated show now, by the way. It's like a Shatner money grab, but worst show ever. And by the way, I have memorabilia from Tech War, if anyone would like it. I keep trying to give it away. No one would like it. But yeah, so no, I got, by the time I got interviewed for Covert, I can't remember, I don't even know why, because I didn't know there are these incredible producers, Hypnotic. Doug Lyman's company produced it, right? They had done the OC, and Doug Lyman wasn't directly involved, but his 2 producers that co-own the company with him, kick-ass people, really good. And I can't remember how or why I got it, but they had interviewed like 11 people, and they're like, you're the one for Covert. And Covert was quite a hard show, actually. If you see the level of stunts and VFX in Covert for a 1-hour TV show, pretty high. And they were going across the hall because those Suits was shot across the hall 1 year later to do Suits. And they're like, we just got to take you with us. You're going to love this one. It's comedy. Right. And so I had to go over to see.
Of course. So what is it like? Because I've talked to like TV directors and like going in there for like, or even like cinematographers, if you go in for like a one-off. So like on some of these shows, I don't know if, I'm sure you've done that, right? Like just went in for an episode or 2 episodes.
Yeah. Well,
is that hard to adapt? What's really hard for our department is if we have to go in for a day, because you have to know the whole script, all the continuity, and you have to know what day you're landing on. So I hate doing day, but doing 1 episode is usually okay. I often do the pilot. Like I'll do the pilot and then I'll FO because I will like then go work on a big movie instead, right? In Toronto, and it's not like this around the world. Like I think in the States on the East Coast, you get paid the same whether you're working in TV or movies, but in most of Canada, in all of Canada, there's a huge pay raise if you do movies over TV. So there's not really an incentive to keep working in TV unless they'll pay your movie rate, you know? And they're not going to do that.
Well, sometimes they offer, but it
nice.
Just, I have to decide if it's worth it, right? Because it's longer. They're longer gigs too.
Oh, the movies, yeah. Some can be a lot.
TV shows can be okay. The Shazam was a long movie. It was like 8 months or 9 months because we went back.
Whoa.
We did like 6 months at first, and then we went back and did 2.5 months of reshoots. So, and that was all budgeted and planned. It was like always something, Warner New Line was going to do. I can't remember who shot that. New Line, right? Yeah, it was always something that they had budgeted for. But most TV series, you're working at least 9 months, and it's long. It's a grind. It's a lot.
Well, you're shooting an episode a week?
Well, usually for a 1 hour show, you would get 7 or 8 days, depending. Like Covert was 7 or 8 days plus 2 days of second unit, whereas Suits would be 7 days. It was an easy show. Yeah.
Wow. And then at what point, obviously there's so many credits that you have, but like when was it that you were like, I want to take the information that I've learned over the years and like start giving back, like doing the director whisper, which I love that name of it, because to be honest, before I chatted with you, I could have Googled it and probably read something that said like, this is what Daniela does day in, day out. But I'd like to hear it from you. But I think that's such a good name now, even better, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, literally and figuratively, right? So it came out of a joke. The title, that's my company, Director Whisper Inc., and the name of my course. So first of all, I want to say I started training people before I was anything. So I started training people 3 years into my career. And the reason I did that is because it's the reason I teach comedy writing. It's the reason I teach everything I've ever taught. I learn from teaching. So 3 years into my career, I started training script supervisors, because there were no reputable programs at the time. And I thought, damn, like this is a 6-figure career. It's like an easy 6-figure career that you can make the money in 6 months, right? So for me, that meant the other 6 months I could write, I could act, I could do whatever I wanted. And I could teach. I love teaching. So I started teaching in 1994. Wow. 94, 95. Yeah. So a lot of my students are from those years are my contemporaries, and a bunch of them went on to become directors, because it is a position where you will get promoted to director, especially if you work a lot in television. And I do a whole video about why that is on YouTube. But yes, so I started teaching really, really early on, and then became a better script supervisor for it. And then over the years, people knew me as that person who trains in Canada. And people would fly in from all over the world to take my, not all over the world, actually, from the States and the Caribbean. And, that was it, right? But then once lockdown hit in 2020, I was like, I got to keep teaching. And how do I do this? And so I took it all online. Now I have students in 16 countries, over 300 students trained with me in the last 2 years. And here's the thing. Everybody's working because the world is on fire, and they're just making more movies instead of less. So, in the UK, where you think, oh, they're going to be affected by the war, they're shooting like there's no tomorrow. People are getting pulled I have a student, I won't say what movie, I'm not allowed to say what movie. It's a massive action movie. She just started training in November. She was an assistant, because in the UK they have script assistants, and she got pulled in to do second unit in Italy and Spain on this massive movie. So not even a year in. So this is what's happening right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it just the lack of, over the years, did you just notice that, hey, when you went out for an audition or for it, did you notice that there was only a handful rather than you'd expect a bunch of people?
It's a high burnout position, as you can expect. So
yeah, that's true.
I would warn people, pace yourself. Because in my 20s, I didn't pace myself. It's so easy to get sick in film in general, but to get, script supervisors literally burn out within 15 years. And I'm told the number is now 7 years. So if you're listening to this and you want to be a script supervisor, just pace yourself, because you can make 6 figures in 6 months. Do that. Don't try to work all year. Don't sacrifice your marriage, your family, or whatever. It's just movies. You'll make more,
When did you learn that? When did you learn not to burn out? In the 90s, early on, or no?
I learned the hard way. So in 2007, I got, we thought I had cancer. It didn't turn out, it turned out to be benign. But I had a cancer scare, and in Canada, it takes a while. It's not like they, there's a little bit of a backlog in the health system. So it took 6 weeks to figure out if I had cancer or not. I had surgery to remove a tumor. and turned out I didn't have cancer. It was benign. They got rid of it. But in those 6 months, I couldn't work because I was healing from my surgery. And I was like just rethinking my life going, was it worth it to give all my 20s to being on set? I don't think so. So I became really conscious, really, really conscious. And I learned to say no to a lot of stuff and really pick, the films and TV shows that really spoke to me and just really take my time off. Cause you can, there's so much money. Yeah.
That's crazy. So to your comedy writing, what are some of the shows that influenced you? Like, was it shows you watched growing up, or is there like writers that you look up to?
It's interesting because I don't think I have. I think like everything is look, I love European cinema, which has nothing to do with comedy. I love every kind of sitcom probably that was ever made. And not only the live to tape, but I just used to, as a kid, I haven't devoured television as an adult the way I did as a kid ever. And I always say it's because I'm always on set. Like, when am I going to do that? Yeah. Right. But as a kid in the 70s and 80s, of course, think of all the shows that were big. I watched them all. Right. So I don't really have something that I say that's what I do. Cause even my own comedy, it's just stories from my life. It's like, I was a very R-rated comic. Obviously I can't write R-rated screenplays cause you can't sell those or market those as much. But and R-rated only in the sense that I was honest about sexuality and all kinds of stuff on stage that I could never ever say on set. And when those two worlds kind of collided, it was overlapping when I was on Suits, they'd be like, do some of your act. I'm like, I can't, I'll get fired. I'll get a warning shot from HR. So some of the directors would just come to the show and see it there. Cause then that was an acceptable place to do
my gosh. So what are some of the shows that you're writing? Are they 30-minute multicam or
it's funny. I train comedy writers and I train a lot of most of us here don't write multicam because it's not a thing in Canada, but my American writers will. No, we don't have multicam stages. We've had 2 shows, King of Kensington, which is from the 70s. And then there was a show shot here called Spun Out with Dave Foley, and they got shut down after a season. I don't know if you remember that. They got shut down because one of the lead actors had installed cameras and was spying on his female tenants. So he was, the show was shut down because he was a perv, basically. And
was it somebody I know? Or was he
He's a Canadian. I don't know his name, actually. He must
be a big improv guy or stand-up guy, I bet. I had to look that up after this.
He was an improv guy. Yeah, I can't remember his name even. He was Canadian famous, which is not famous, right? I'm Canadian famous. Oh my God, I got stopped in the street. I was in Vancouver last week. I got stopped twice by 2 different people going, Daniela, I know you from your YouTube videos. I was like, I have 400 subscribers. How is that possible? But people are watching YouTube. It's so cray. But
that's awesome. What do you do on your YouTube videos? Talking about script supervising or R-rated comedy?
I talk about comedy writing, script supervision, and entrepreneurship. Because I have I train people in all those things. So that it's a weird channel because you're not supposed to mix your topics, but I do.
You do what you want. No, that's pretty cool. I'll make sure to put a link in that. No, I think it's so cool that just all the facets. And I think that's so true. Reinventing yourself. There's so many different things that you do in your life. Even looking back on your 20s, obviously you were like, hey, I worked too much. I, pretty much burnt out, and you teach people that, but those are probably some things that you probably wouldn't have learned and wouldn't have been able to bestow upon people that you're interacting with. Be like, hey, take it easy. I went through this.
Oh, yeah. So besides the actual director whispering, so I teach people, because there's a few people in the world who train script supervisors, and we're all different. We all teach it, obviously, from our own perspective. And mine is really to become that stealth person on the director's team who they have full trust in, so that they will communicate with you. And you will get what you need from them, which is to make sure that their movie's going to cut together beautifully. And sometimes you can't get that if the director is shutting you out and saying that doesn't matter, because they're not seeing what you're trying to say. And you're like, it will matter when you're in the cutting room. And this is so when you can get the trust of this is why I think this young girl who just got flown off to Italy and Spain to do that, I think she was able to nail that during her assistantship, when she was just training. Cause that's the first thing I'm like, okay, so even before I teach them how to do the job. I teach them what the director does, because we have to understand the kind of pressure and the kind of creative things that are just flying around their brain all day so that we can protect that. I always used to say my job was protecting the actor's performance, because in many ways it is. In many ways, like, you're in that inner circle, and if you just say or do something that is out of line, distracting, you can wreck a performance. And a performance is everything. It's everything. You can have the worst movie in the world, but if it's got a performance, people will watch it just for that, right? So yeah, I used to say my job is really to protect the actor's performance, which it is, but it's also to protect the director's sort of mental health and like creative flow. And so I teach that first, and then I teach them access and coverage, and then I teach them how to do the job, which is an intense amount of paperwork and intense amount of protocol and all that.
I bet, but that's like you said, that takes obviously years of practice and like being able to read people, because that's gotta be like so hard. Even if somebody like nails a scene and something like the line's wrong, or you have to like know what to do, or know what the director, hey, this director might be okay with it because they were sort of close to the line, or that's gotta be tough.
And you know, there's so many different kinds of actors, and so you also got to know when to approach them, because some of them you can't ever approach. Some actors surprised me. So my favorite was Harvey Keitel. He was so hard in terms of continuity. And if you work with any method actor, it's going to be way more difficult. Your job will be way more difficult, because they're never, I said this once and I got in trouble. I don't mean it like this. Once I said they're never about craft. That's not true. They're all about being in the moment and just being real, which means they can do something 50 different ways and it's still achieving the goal they want to hit. But, you know, part of the craft is being able to edit and Harvey wouldn't even say his lines till several takes in, because he wanted to be the character before he said the lines, right? Which is great. Like, it's that why he's so good. But it meant a lot of extra work for me, like being on the set and calling out lines and being, you know, and it was, but you know what? It was, when it's for that caliber of talent, it becomes so worth it. So, yeah.
Wow. So he would do the scene without saying any words?
He would. Well, listen, I study acting in New York, and it's the same. Like, it's, you got to feel believable to yourself before you can make anyone else believe you. And so, you know, and this was a very tough, because I did The Path to 9/11, which was, I don't know if you saw that. It was only on air once because they got sued by the Clinton administration. Rightfully so. Yeah. It was, and Keitel was the lead, and he knew the guy he was playing, and he knew some, anyway, I can't even get into the politics of what was going on, but he doesn't usually do television. It was a miniseries, so the schedule is so much faster. Yeah. So in movies, you do have more time to explore the scene as an actor, but in movies, it's different. So we shot Path to 9/11 like a movie, in the sense that we took more time, but we had 5 cameras going all the time.
Jeez. Where'd you study in New York?
I studied with John Strasberg. Do you know his stuff?
Oh, yeah. Well, I know the Lee Strasberg School, so that's a relative.
It's his son, but John teaches. He's like a legacy from his dad, but teaches very differently. So Steve Buscemi was one of John's students, and so there's been some very big actors that studied with John. His father, Lee Strasberg, was about sense memory, whereas John is about training your imagination, which I freaking love. And you know, Harvey studied with Lee, so I knew what Harvey. I kind of know what he was doing and what he needed, obviously, but yeah, it's the whole New York school New York is a school for acting.
Yeah, no, it's so funny that his son's so different. Yeah, because I just interviewed an actress, so I talked to a lot of people that went to that school, and then there was the female teacher in New York around the same time. It was like
Stella. Oh wait, it was Stella a female? Stella Adler.
Yeah.
I can't remember if Stella was a female. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was amazing. So.
Yeah. So there's
she taught script analysis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but with Lee, the actress I talked to was like, I'm in this class, and you have like, he's making you pretend to be like you're drooling. She's like, you would have all these actors sit there and just lay in the chair, like lifeless and drooling for like half an hour. She's like, I only did it because that's what I had to do, like, to get that notoriety. But that's so funny. That's great to be able to work with you. It's cool. His son saw that and was like, I want to be different. And imagination.
Yeah, because a lot of actors were complaining that they were just going into their traumas all day, and that's not as fun. Because, you know, you go into memory so that you can cry. And listen, I've worked with a ton of actors who studied with his father, with Lee, and like Laura Dern was in his school. So Harvey, I worked with Meatloaf. R.I.P. Meatloaf. And he studied a different kind of method, a whole different kind of method where you try on all these pairs of shoes. And if you can find the right pair of shoes, you are that character. He did that kind of method, which is a New York thing.
Wow.
And he was good. And then once he was in those shoes, you had to speak to him in character. You had to, like, I couldn't give him a continuity note and say, hey, you had the cigar. I had to call him by his character name. Hey, Freddie, weren't you smoking a cigar earlier? It was like that. Yeah.
I love that. So you have the shoes. That's great. Oh, man. So, Daniela, I always like to ask this for folks. Obviously, you knew when you saw Jim Morrison in 8th grade that you were going to do something in this crazy world. But was there anything else that you had on the back burner, like that you thought, like, you know what, if this film thing doesn't work out, I'm going to try to do blank. Was there anything?
No, I did not know what I wanted to. Oh, actually, when I was a little kid, I thought I wanted to be, the first thing I ever wanted to be was a tap dancer, because I used to watch Sammy Davis. I used to watch a whole bunch of tap dancers, and my mother flipped the hell out. No, you're going to be poor. So it was like, okay, don't be poor, don't be poor. But I never, I mean, I've been writing. I learned to speak English when I was 5 because I spoke Italian, and the first thing I did was start writing poetry. So I think writing was always a thing, but I just never thought of it as a job. Like, it was just never something that I could think, oh, you can make a living at that. So no, I had nothing. I did ask Don Cheadle this question because I asked him, like, what would you do? Because he's great, by the way. I call him the patron saint of Hollywood. He's such a good human being. But I said, Don, what would you do if you weren't an actor? Because he told me this intense story about his wife, like, who wanted to be an actor, and she's mixed race, Asian and African American, and they weren't in the 80s. They weren't writing roles for anybody like that. So she never. And I said, what would you do if that happened to you? And he said, I think I would do a lot of drugs, because there's no high like it. There's no high like acting. I mean, I know that, even not being a full-time actor. Yeah.
But you know, from like stand up, like there's that high, like I did improv when we lived in Portland, and it was just like this little place, like none of the big like schools. It was just a local one that was started, but there's this high performing in front of these people, even though it's like 30 people that are like just there to see their buddies or drinking. No, there is that high going on stage. But no, I think what Don said and like what you said is really what most of the people I talk to say. They say like, oh, well, I guess this, but that's why you're doing what you're doing, because it was your tunnel vision. Because this isn't an industry that you can just be like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. Because you're gonna be going against people that are the ones like you sending that perfect cover letter, fax letter, or begging for the job. So like that, you have to have the hunger. People appreciate that.
They really do. And especially when, you know, Greek Wedding was an indie film, and Boondock was an indie film. Can I tell you the Boondock story? It was so funny.
Yeah.
Is this okay? I know it's a cult film. That's why, like, I have so many students who are like, Boondock, tell me more Boondock stories.
Oh, everybody saw that. Yeah.
When I went in for the interview for that, I was this shy, quiet, large kid. I was 30. And Troy said, "What'd you think of my fucking script?" Right? Because he swore all the time. And I said, "Oh my God, I loved it." Not realizing it was a comedy. I knew it was I thought it was a comedy, but I was like, shit, I hope it's a comedy. Because I said, I laughed so hard. And he went, "Good, you're fucking hired." Because everyone else said that they were offended. And I was like, it was so funny, that script. Like, it was so crazy. And I was like, oh, thank God it was a comedy. Because if it wasn't, he would have.
He dodged a bullet there. If it was the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was quite a personality. I love personalities, especially when I was so meek and quiet. I was like, sure, just surround me with the most out there people. It's great.
And directors are obviously actors and other people like behind the camera too. But like some directors, like it's a job that it like doesn't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you mean like between, because I have some terrible stories of directors. There's a director who's no longer with us who died really tragically. I won't say who it is, but he was so talented. And he had only ever made a couple of movies. And he was reckless. Like when we were on set, he was so reckless, like sleeping with everybody and like, you know, just taking a lot of drugs. I was like, what are you doing? Cause he was like a middle-aged guy. And he goes, you don't understand. The development process is hell on an ego. It's like you're nobody, you're nothing. You spend years just trying to raise the money. And the moment you go into production, you're the king. And he's like, I just want to make use of my time as the king.
Want to take advantage of it. Like a real king.
Like a real king.
Jeez.
It was sad because he was so talented and it ultimately is what led to his death. So it was sad. Yeah. You guys will have to guess which one of my million credits that is.
I'll have to think of that. But, so you mentioned before, like you wanted people to take your, if anybody wanted your mementos from Tech War, but is that something you thought about? Obviously that's early on. Was that something you did throughout your career? Like kept scripts or shirts or things like that they gave away?
At a certain point, I had to let go of the scripts because they're, you know, what a script supervisor script is like this thick because you've got all the notes. So I got, it's too bad I got rid of Jason X. I got a nice offer for that one, but and I'm not legally allowed to sell my scripts. But you know what's interesting? In the 90s, we never signed NDAs. So anything after 2000 and onward, but the only script I kept and I still have it is my original line script for my Big Back Greek Wedding. I read that the original script, the script supervisor script from Gone with the Wind, it was on Antiques Roadshow and it got sold for $33,000 US.
So you're keeping
those were hand typed. Yeah. Well, I mean, that movie meant a lot to me. So that's what I kept from Greek Wedding. Yeah, I have, you know, they give us a lot of stuff over the years. No, from Tech War, they gave us these pins that were like cyber. I mean, it's kind of interesting if you watch the original Tech War, which I don't recommend, but if you do, you're going to go, oh my God, they predicted a paperless society in 1993. They predicted like so much about what we're living in. And I'm like, but you know, Shatner said he had actually his ghostwriter came to set. He had a ghostwriter. So the ghostwriter predicted it.
The ghostwriter predicted it. How about was Jason X? I mean, that was probably a script that you got not when you were like on set. It wasn't one that usually with those movies, they always have a fake name for the movie before.
Oh, but not back then. This was back before confidentiality and NDAs. I feel like the world kind of changed after 2001. Then okay, listen, like Suicide Squad,
that is
there
true.
Was the name of the movie. Every single character's name was redacted. So like in the script, no one was allowed to have an actual script, not even the script supervisor. So they would print out sides that we had to sign out, and like the Joker would be Smiley. Like there were fake names for everybody, so that it could never get leaked.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And that makes your job that much harder. That means you can only work while you're there, right? Or
yeah, well, you also have to see. We also have to take notes home at night and type out all our notes and everything. So, but I'm trying to remember how we did that. It was intense just getting around the 14 lead characters with 14 fake names. Smiley the Joker, that's easy, but yeah. Yeah.
God, that's awesome. Well, Danielle, I'm so happy we connected. This is so much fun because I never obviously knew what your job like fully entailed, but it's so much. Like you're right that it would cause burnout. Like just so many different things that you have to keep an eye on all at the same time.
And dealing with the personalities. I think dealing with the personalities for some people is the hardest part of the job. And so you got to know, like, can you tolerate every level of crazy? If you can do that, you're golden.
Then you're golden.